My name's Steve Corwin. Some of you know me from having actually been here a number of years. I'm a software architect at Venuetize.com, primarily focusing on the back end. And tonight I'm going to be talking about Java single file applications and the niche that I think they're really interesting for, which is replacing Bash and other forms of shell scripts. So why would you want to do that? Well, my primary motivation was just trouble I ran into. We were chasing a production issue. I needed to go out and rep through the logs on all the nodes in a cluster and get counts of the error codes that were in the access logs. And so I had an example and I had enough knowledge of how to put the SSH command together. That was pretty straightforward. Go out and go over all the servers, get the data back. And it's coming back as a string with one count and then an embedded new line in the next count. And somewhere towards the end of that, I thought, it would be really nice if I could just make a CSV file. All I need to do is pick apart this string with these two numbers and get them in separate fields, and I can output them with quotes and commas, and I'll be done. Well, that's where things went sideways. I Googled, and I found this parentheses $ thing, because make my result string treat as an array. And then I can get the values out of that with the $ curly brace and array indexes, but I had still the embedded new line, so I Googled, well, how do I get rid of white space in Bash, came up with this other thing, spent a bunch of time trying to inline these because they all seem pretty simple, but I could just never get the right combination of $ and curly braces and $ and parentheses and whatever else it was. So I just kept pounding away at it till I got it to work. This is working code here that I'm showing you. But as you can see, I had to make an intermediate variable for every single step and print out every single value until I finally got it to work. And at the bottom, you just echo it out, and there's your actual line in the CSV file. So at the last meeting of the Java user group, it had been mentioned that there was this new feature in Java 11 where you could run a simple Java application without compiling it. And I had sort of tucked that away in the back of my mind as something that would be interesting to look at one day. Because I'm a Java developer. I mean, I've been a Java developer for years. I know how to sit down and start a new web service, figure out where everything's going to go, how's this going to be structured, different people are going to work on it, all those kind of concerns. But when I want to do something simple, that always seemed just like overkill. It seemed pretty heavyweight. And it actually is if you're just going to write something for yourself. So the idea that I could just write something and run it from the source code and not even have a compile step was intriguing. When this happened, I decided that I would use this as my test case and just port the thing over to Java and see if I could make it work in a reasonable amount of time. I'll show it later, as much of it as I can demo here. But first to talk about the basics. This Jet 330 is the actual specification. It was on Paul's list earlier. And you can go and read that. It's not that long. It's actually pretty simple. You need at least Java 11, and you need a Java app which only has one file. And you need public static void main, just like you've always done public static void main. It's no different. And then you can invoke that using either Java on the command line or a shebang. And so I'm going to start with a Hello World program. And that's because I read the spec, I read some blog posts. It wasn't entirely clear. All the docs were about the preview version. And so I wasn't sure if some minor things had changed. So I started with Hello World and just built my way up from there. And I'm going to be showing a bunch of code. So if I'm cruising along through here and you want to ask a question, maybe get me to stop. So this is the first app, Hello World. As you can see, it's really straightforward. It's got a typical class, it's got a typical main method. It does just one println, and I can go down here to my command window and I can run that. And there it is. And note about the way I'm invoking this, I've got this big long path here. That's because Java 11 is not actually my default JDK for production usage. And I didn't want to change the default JDK on my laptop, so I've got the full explicit path to where I happen to have installed Java 11. If you had Java 11 as your default, you could dispense with that. So otherwise, you just keep doing this. But you can see this is kind of a pain to type or to remember if you don't have it handy with the up arrow. And you don't want to do that. You start thinking about what you could do, where you can make a shell script to run it, but that kind of defeats the purpose to make a shell script run your shell script. So fortunately for us, other programmers have had this problem a long time ago and solved it with this thing called a shebang, which is actually just these first two characters of this first line. This £! Exclamation point, that's known as a hash and a bang in the Unix world, and somehow it got nicknamed shebang. And if you're like me, you've always seen this followed with like /bin/sh, these sort of very obscure looking things. It turns out that's just the name of a program. You can put anything you want there. So I've just stuck the same path to Java that I was showing before in there. And then one difference is that you do need to pass this -- source flag. And I'm using version 11, not because the code is in Java 11, just because it's inconsistent for the test and the presentation. And so once you've got this, then the other thing you need to do is you need to make your file executable. And so if I go back to this one, the hello world shebang is an executable file. I'm executing it just like any other way you would do this on Linux. And so I can run that, and that worked like a charm too. But the one problem I had, this is loaded in Eclipse, as you can see, and as you may have noticed, it's not colorized because Eclipse doesn't recognize this as a Java file. And I really wanted to have the ID and all power of refactoring and all those sorts of things. So I started experimenting with that. I made one that combines both having a shebang and having a .java extension, which you can see Eclipse is recognizing as Java because it's giving me a compiler error on the shebang line. And this one, let me see, this one will work if you have the shebang commented out. Right now I don't, so you can see it fails because it tries basically to compile that shebang line, and that doesn't work. And if I run it as an executable, the file is executable, but that also doesn't work. It will work if I comment out the shebang line, but I wasn't entirely happy with that. Okay, it does work. So I kept going, tried the .jv extension, because somewhere in the documentation I'd seen mention this, and it wasn't clear what they were doing, but I thought perhaps that's some special way to deal with this. So this is again executable, and it works through the shebang, but the problem is that Eclipse still doesn't recognize this as a .java file. I tried briefly to convince Eclipse somehow, but I couldn't find any way to do that. I don't know if other IDs might be better. So I never really found a solution, but what I found is, kind of a workaround, which is to make a symbolic link. And I'll show you that in a second. So, you can read those colors, but basically I've got a file, it's a .java file that's executable, and then I've got a symbolic link with the same name but no extension pointing to that Java file. And because of that, I can then run that through the symbolic link, and it will work, and then I can load it into Eclipse, and it will recognize it just because I loaded the .java file. So that was the output, just to prove that it works, and then I will go in and explain a little more. So this is my .java file. It's called rep for 500's 504 csv.java, because this is based on the original application that I did, but everything is local here because doing a demo that was going to rely on the Wi-Fi working and getting an internet connection and going out and touching production servers just didn't seem like a good idea. So it's got the shebang like we talked about before. This one's bigger, so it's got some imports, just your regular imports. And some comments about how I do this to keep track of what's going on. And then it's got a class, matches the file name, some variables to set up. These are all in directories, but inside the directory tree, there's a directory named server1, another one named server2, and so on. And it's going to iterate over all of those. And it's got a main method, just like always. And then here, it's Java, so I can write the stuff that I'm familiar with. So I wanted to write a check your arguments method to do a straightforward check of the arguments. Well, I just sat down and wrote it because I'm used to this stuff. And this one just does a simple check to make sure there is one argument to save me from running something that's just going to blow up anyways. After that, you've got a couple of member variables, well, actually just a variable, and a couple things to do some debugging. and then a loop over all the servers, which now is just a regular for each loop instead of an arcane syntax, and then a method that gets called every time. And this first server is a flag just so that the function that's called has an opportunity to print things only once. That's how I do the header row, for example. So I've left commented out here the check 500s, 504s. This is the original method, and I put it in here just to show this was the kind of thing I was doing, and this does work when you've got everything in place. And every time it assembles this big SSH command and runs it. The comment here is an example of what it looks like when it's assembled for server 1. And so this is fairly, it does a fair bit of stuff. It SSHs into server 1. It runs non-interactively. It kicks off a grep for 500s in the access log, pipes that through WC to get a count, then it kicks off another grep for 504s, pipes that through WC to get another count. And the result is, again, a string with a number and then a line feed and another number. Getting that to work was a piece of cake. I did a runtime get exec, I exec that string, it all worked. For this demo, I decided that I would simplify this greatly. I would do about a third of this. I would do just the grep and the WC. That turned out to be quite a battle because there's something about grep that it just does not like to be run from the simple exec. I don't know what. I think it has something to do with the way grep knows a lot about what the standard in, the other streams it's reading from, and changes behavior depending upon whether you're piping it or not. But the main thing I knew was that it wasn't working. It was giving me nice informative messages like exit status equals 2 or just hanging. And so fortunately for me, other people have figured this out, and thank goodness for Stack Overflow. I went out there and went through that, and I'm going to go down to the execute command function here. Oh, here we go. So instead of my original line, runtime.get runtime.exec, I had to use this process builder. And what you actually have to do is not run grep directly, but run the shell /bin/sh, and you pass a -c, what tells it to execute the command, and then you can execute the original command that was passed in, and it will work. So then you have to make a process builder and start it. There's one side benefit, this redirect error stream method. You can set that to true, and that does the same as redirecting standard error. So that at least gave me a little more clue about what grep was so unhappy about. So with that out of the way, then what you do, you kick off the process, start the process, and then there's a process that wait for, which is a blocking call until the process completes. And then I've got an input reader here collecting all the input and looping it into a list of lines. And in here I've got line.trim, which is my nice, simple, get rid of the new line and all the white space. Get all that done, it's just a regular method again, return the output list. And then I can come back up here to my methods, and I've done the grep for 500s. I get back the output list for that, and do another grep for 504s, get another output list. And then I can just form that, and at this point it's easy. Each output list has exactly one line, and pop those in there and off you go. And so that is what this is doing. Let me make this big. There we go. And you can see it's going out and it's putting out a bunch of debug output, and it's echoing the commands so I can see what's going on. And interspersed there are the actual counts and the actual files that I've downloaded. And of course, as I said originally, I want to make a CSV file, so I could have put in like a verbose mode flag or something, but I was lazy and took the shell scripting approach, which is I have to think through a grep and get rid of everything I don't want. And if you do that, then what you get is actually a CSV file. So you go copying or pasting, whatever you want to do. So, and this, I just wanted to show, this is the original file. I can't show you the entire thing because it's got server names in it, but that first method is the first one I wrote inside the loop. And then I needed to do a different check, so I just commented out some lines and made it do a different thing. And then I needed a third check, comment out some lines, do a different thing. Needed to do something else, realized I need to do a method refactoring here. Well, at least I've got my IDE, makes that simple. And I started making these methods, and I just kept adding to it whenever I needed to do something. I just add another method and comment out the previous one until I need to go back to it. Until it got to the point where I was setting up to do this demo, and I needed to go around to every server and download an access log. Well, that seemed like a drag, and then I realized, oh, I'll just write a method to do that. So this one's got no greps or anything in it, but it's making directories and SCPing the files down in it. So as you can see, it's kind of going on. And then before the grep stuff went sideways, I was going to experiment a little more. The one question I have is just how far could you go? Could you start pulling in other classes from other libraries if you wanted to? It should be nice to use string utils as blank, for example. So I was experimenting with that. I didn't get it entirely operational. I mean, you can do it. The import is just a regular import, and I can run this from the command line with this command. And the only real difference is now I've got the class path, and I've got to give it a valid location in the commons lang.jar, which I just pointed to one of my main repositories because that was easy. And that will work fine. But I could not get that to work with the shebang. I don't know if that's a limitation of that mechanism or just something that I didn't figure out. As you can see here, I've been doing lots of other things with just the stuff that's built into Java. That's my main motivation. Oh, and one other thing I forgot. The reason that this thing would hang, I finally figured out, was in the execute command method. There's just some sort of limitation with the way I coded this up. I don't know if it's inherent, but if the command produces more than 64K output, it just hangs. I don't know if it would eventually complete. I always killed it after a minute or so because these reps and things should complete in a few seconds normally, and will if everything's working properly. But it just got stuck. Oh God, I briefly didn't get anywhere. But again, as you can see, for the things I needed to do, I mean, if I have 64K of output, I've done something wrong. The only reason I ever counted that was that the grep wasn't working, so I thought it was my regular expression. So you keep making your regular expression shorter and shorter until something comes out. And that's when I got a bazillion lines matching. So I'm going to switch back to the slides, make sure I didn't forget anything. Didn't practice doing this with a microphone. I'm playing little piano chords on my keyboard here. The world, talk about that, shebangs. This is the iExam portion of the presentation. You guys in the bathroom over there, right? Now, just in case somebody wanted to get the code for this and experiment with yourself, I pasted the whole thing in here in literally 6-point font, so you could get the slides from Paul or download them and copy and paste it all back out. And then talk to libraries, and yeah. So that's it. It's working pretty well for me. Questions?
Did you look at JLink when you were trying to pull in another library?
No, I used that briefly doing the Docker thing, JLink, and it was mostly about not having such a big Java VM. I use it to shrink the size of the VM to get the size of my Docker image down. And this site didn't really have any motivation. I don't know if you could JLink in third-party jars. I don't know. Certainly never thought of that.
Okay.
See, behind the scene was a single file compile.
The spec on whether is a little vague on whether it actually compiles. It certainly is attempting to compile. If you look at the error codes that come out, they basically look like compiler errors. My impression is that it's doing kind of whatever it is that happens under the scenes in the JIT. Let me see here. That's the one. And these look like compiler errors. So Mikhail last month talked about ahead of time compilation and how it uses a different format internally. I think it's doing some of that behind the scenes. I haven't encountered any sign that it's actually making a class file and hiding it from me. What else? Going
Thanks.
Thank you.